Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, got the opportunity to play a little bit of golf today, and I've talked about this before, previous to doing any YouTube videos. In fact, I did a demonstration thing of this when I was in school many years ago. But um, But talking about golf, right? Golf is a lot of folks. There are not a lot of folks that play golf. There are a lot that do. Let me qualify this. Let me start out correctly. There are many people who play golf, but then there is another part of culture who just could care less, right? And today, I'm not going to be talking about golf as trying to convince you need to play, or that if you're a great golfer, you have it all figured out. Because as we know, just like in life, we don't, all of us, any one of us, have it all figured out, right? It's always an evolution of ascending through life, learning and growing, right? But it has to be an intentional, sorry about that, an intentional learning, growing, and so forth. Okay, that's it. Let's talk about the golf now. You're like, shut up, just get to the golf. um, so with golf, right? And I'm not a pro golfer. Let me tell you that right out of the gate. I am not a pro golfer. I'm better than recreational. I'll just leave it there. But what I am is a person who's intrigued. I enjoy nature. I love being out in the environment, a beautiful day, green grass, right? No different than if I go hiking, which I often have and do. No different. I love being out in nature and being a part of that environment, right? It's very healing. It's a healing environment even if you don't play golf. If you're a person who is just um, in that environment, not playing the game, there's a healing nature to it. Not unlike if you were playing frisbee golf, and the elements of that too, right? You can pull from a lot of different avenues. Anyway, moving on. But with golf, one thing about golf is, like so many things, there's a technical element to it, right? You have to learn how to properly hold your club, um, how to select your club based on your distance and the lie of the ball, how the ball is laying on the ground, and so forth, right? And so there's some technical elements. Beyond that, it's so much about keeping your eye focused on your aim point, not jerking up your head, not lifting your shoulders. Some things that you essentially no different than baking a cake. There's ingredients that go into hitting a golf ball, right? There's a technical aspect to it. No different, well, different, but similar than if you were in any other sport or activity. If you're a hunter, right? If you're a person who throws darts, if you're a bowler, if you're pick a sport or an activity, and there are technical elements that you have to know how to do, right? And with your jobs, right? In our organizations, in our households, how you operate the dishwasher. You're teaching the young people in your home, hey, this is how you operate the dishwasher. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. And you give them technical instruction, right? I find it fascinating that we can give technical instruction in so many of these areas, but we won't take a few minutes, especially now with the internet, it makes it so much easier to learn these other kind of things. And a person doesn't have to play golf every day to enjoy it. You don't even have to be great at golf. But what you do have to do, just like you do with anything, is you have to be aware of the essential elements and technical aspects of, so that you can better enjoy. So and I'm not a cook, right? But I don't play one on TV, but I could taste test the heck out of food. So, but it's no different, right? You have ingredients, you get them ready, you prepare them, you XYZ, the stove, the oven, I'm a grill guy. But anyway, so you you do all that, right? And that's a technical. Those are technical skills, right? No different than anything else. Now, granted, one is I'm providing sustenance to survive. The other one is a recreational activity given. But now let's move on to the lessons of golf, for example. And I'm using golf as my metaphor, but you can replace golf with, if you're an artist, if you're an engineer, if you're replace this with anything else. But when you're playing golf, if you don't apply all the technical aspects together, which tends to be the challenge with golf, right? And you hit the ball, you could shank it, right? Hit it off course into the woods, into the sand, into the pond or the ocean, or depending on where you are, what hazards, okay, or obstructions or off the course completely in some cases, into the parking lot, right, into the houses. Hope not, but happens. But those are the things that happen, and so much of golf is relaxing, being able to apply the technical aspects of this, being comfortable in your own skin, having a continuous and a continuous cadence, right? A rhythm to your play. And then when you make a mistake, don't get jerked off track. Similarly, then when you slip and slide on an icy road, jerking the wheel is not the answer when you're slipping and sliding on the road, because why? You make it worse. And this is the same with golf, as an example, right? Our example today is if you get ticked off at yourself, or you're just irritated that you hit it off into the woods or whatever, because you know that the next shot's going to be equally or more difficult, the enjoyment drops, right? Because you had an expectation, but you made a mistake. You failed, right? You did. You failed, made a mistake, you failed, and you did it. The challenge of golf is to go, you know what? I made this mistake. Okay, let's focus on how I get clear of this hazard. Take the steps necessary to clear the hazard, whatever that might be. Hitting through it, over it. Might have to throw out, take a penalty, whatever. but doing those things and removing an element not of accountability, because remember, you're writing down your score, right? You're writing down your score because you have an expectation, and you're not just playing one hole and you're done. You're playing a series of holes, right? 9 or 18, depending on what you do. And because at the end you want to assess, how did I perform overall? You shank it off into the woods and do all that stuff. Anyway, you make the recovery and you do what you have to do. But there are lessons to be learned from every time you hit the ball. There's sometimes you might, hit the ball and you top it, which is hitting, half or above the top of the ball instead of hitting down through it. When that happens, the ball doesn't go far. It just kind of peters off in the distance, maybe 25 to 80 yards, depending. and it's not a fruitful feeling to top the ball. It's not a fruitful feeling to hit too deep or cut too deep into the earth, into the course itself, the sod and underneath. Because what happens, you don't really make a good contact, and oftentimes the ball doesn't go a whole lot further than the other, and it leaves you feeling a little deflated, right? It's okay in the moment to go, oh, geez. But the challenge of golf is to go, you know what, made a mistake, did the thing, whatever it was. Picked up my eyes, picked up my shoulders, pushed too hard instead of pulling through. All these different things that a lot of folks are aware of in golf. Didn't turn over the club as they came through, all these things. So there becomes a balance between identifying when we've made a mistake and then keeping our energy in a calm, methodical, thoughtful way and going, you know what? Yeah, we screwed up. All right, how are we going to overcome this? But if I was to turn to somebody else that I'm golfing with and go, rah, and get mad at them, that serves no purpose. It accomplishes nothing. It doesn't take away the mistake. It doesn't help anything going forward. Similarly, it doesn't help the rest of our game if the people you're playing with also are, getting irritated with each other or not having a good time. And in some cases, having a good time is just being able to let it go and enjoy being out in nature and having the opportunity to take the next shot. And isn't really that what life is all about? Relaxing enough and not being so hard on yourself that you're relaxed enough to go, you know what? Yeah, kind of boofed that one. And, onward and upward to the next shot, right? And then, of course, you're gauging your play as you go. And now this is also just as much a metaphor for life as it is in our organizations and on our teams, right? Is that we have to keep our focus and not get too, you can't, this is what to keep your energy, right? Think of a sine wave, erratic energy. Oh my gosh, I'm doing great. Oh no, I'm doing terrible. Oh gosh, this is a great shot. Oh, this is terrible. You don't want that erratic thought, mindedness, that erratic mind and erratic physiology does not play well for golf. You want a calm, cool, shallow sine wave. Hey, and that was a decent shot. Great. Take it in stride. It's not about, and I'm not saying being humble. It's not a golf, like so many things. It's not about being humble or verbose or anything like that. It's about enjoying the experience. And when you hit a really good pure shot, and if you can string a few of them together, that you start to enjoy the day, even when you hit the ones where you make mistakes. Now, this is life. We have to be able to enjoy the good shots, but we also must, while we can't get our energy jerked around by the mistakes we make, we do have to do a little backtracking and go, all right, what caused that? Now, people who have played golf for a long time who aren't really great at it, but who learn about what it takes to hit the shot, can do a little self-analysis and go, I picked my head up, picked my shoulders up, I pushed instead of pulling through, I that, da 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 da. And it's okay to hone in on that, but you just want to remove a variable at a time or two, but this is also why we practice, right? On teams, we practice. Now, in organizations, say if you're providing a product and service, you don't get a lot of practice time. But what you do get, okay, and I pull this from when I flew in the Air Force, you get time prior to and after to do a briefing and then a debrief at the, pre-brief and then a debrief at the other end. And the forms that those take in your organizations, not related to flying, are the meetings that you have. Where did we do? What are we doing right? What are we struggling in? And then for what we're struggling in, what can we do to improve? Right. This is essentially, as a team or a group, doing the same thing an individual will do with their golf shot, and saying, okay, what did I do in that instance? Right. And then I need to. And then when you continue to make the same mistake, you have to go a little further into the root cause. What is the root cause? Oh, you know what? Drank an energy drink and this, and this, and I'm just all hyped up and, whatever. You start peeling into the root cause, and what you find is it's your mindset. When you went to play golf, you just were in an argument with a friend or a family member or whatever. If your mindset isn't right going to play golf, it can mess up a good portion of your day unless you're able to go push it out, right? And as we mature, we learn to do that better and better. But you don't get good at that, and that isn't to say push it off and forget it. It's just compartmentalize it. Hey, I can't do that. And why is that relevant? That's relevant because just like in golf or anything else, or when I flew, for example, when we would deploy, I knew that while I was gone for months on end, that I couldn't worry about back home. I needed to be confident that everybody back home was doing what they needed to do to get, things done. Kids were doing homework and, all the things, right? I couldn't be worried about all that while I was flying and while we're doing, maneuvers that are dangerous, okay? Probably the most dangerous. And when you're doing those kinds of things, you have to compartmentalize and be able to be present, right? Now, why is that relevant? Just like as in golf, you need to be present in that shot, in that moment. A movie that I would recommend for you to watch, just the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful movies that I have in my brain is the Legend of Bagger Vance. And while the Bagger Vance character is, crucial to the movie, it really is the lessons being taught within that movie structure that are so critical. It'll make you fall in love with golf even if you've never played. So I highly recommend watch that movie and then um, take some lessons and get some basic fundamentals going and do some range work and whatever. Anyway, I didn't want to get off on the sidebar too far, but you get the idea. Beautiful movie because it addresses a lot of these things, right? um, because you can be a professional, somebody who's accomplished in what you do, and you can fall into the trap of, gosh, I keep doing these things wrong, right? And what happens is you walk back through it, and then you find the root cause of what the drivers are that are creating the problems, the things you're struggling with, right? So if you've had, traumas in your life outside of your organization, outside of work, right? While we do need to and this is a slippery slope too, right? There's a fine line between me talking about compartmentalizing, but when there are significant life events, organizations and most people understand that when those, significant events occur, they're going to rattle our cage. They're going to look, you're not going to hit a good golf shot, 2 days after the passing of a loved one, right? Even if they're a distant, somebody you don't, say a distant family member that you haven't seen for 20 years, irrespective, you're still going to have that in you because of the memories you shared. And I'm not saying that you would, I don't even recommend that you go do that, go play golf 2 days after. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying is that's what I'm saying is that you're not going to be your tip top. And you really do need to take the time to mourn situations. We lose loved ones. That's life. We lose friends. All these things. We but we also mourn the old relationships, right? But you have to take the good. You have to kind of like golf. You have to go, oh, where was the joy and the glory in what I experienced with these people, right? Or with my game. I hit 4 holes really good. Hold on one second. Sorry about that, folks. I think the dog got stung by a bee. I had to take care of that. But but you're not going to be. The bottom line is you're not going to be tip top. You know, in situations when we haven't reconciled essentially traumas and things those, and not everything's a trauma. Some things are just tough experiences. Life is rough, right? It could be all kinds of things. I mean, gosh, we could go through the litany of difficulties. We're all people dealing with our own facets of life, and the struggles are different across the board. And they're no less. Perspective is essentially that we all struggle, okay? But we do have to look back and appreciate through our struggles, whether it's people we've lost, say folks who've passed, that sort of thing, or whether it is relationships that ended, work relationships and otherwise, right? We do have to treasure the experience and the lesson, because when you hit the ball and you shank it off into the woods, for example, or into the sand trap or the pond, while in the moment, and I'm using the moment for a golf shot, but that moment in regular life could be weeks or months, right? For some, maybe a few years. But we have to take the time, briefly or otherwise, to assess, okay, what could I have done differently? Where did I make a mistake? Was my buddy over there asking me questions while I was trying to hit the ball? You know what I mean? Whatever. And because not all of the drivers are internal, we have to own that, and others have to own that as well, that we all play a part. There's this, we're not just living a life solitary to everyone else. We live this life in concert with everyone, right? I'm not telling you what you don't know, but we have to kind of remind ourselves, right? And that we have to understand, while, think of chords or, guitar strings, or piano keys. We all have a different thing we do, right? And the different element of life and different facets and expertise and all these things. And that's what makes it beautiful. But when we can all cooperate, as we talked about in the last video, when we can all cooperate, and we can make some beautiful music, folks. We can. And when we make mistakes, we go, oh, okay. And then we do a little bit of self and team analysis, and we go, oh, okay, this is how we need to do it better. And what you find is that, not unlike playing golf, which is a little bit more individual activity, as you're hitting your own ball, but when you're playing with others, is that there's kind of a flow, right? You get in a flow, and when everybody's got that same energy, hitting a decent shot, when you hit a tough shot, and I'll tell you what, humor is so vital, not only in life, but in work and in just everything, right? All aspects. You kind of have to look within one, if you put us, if I hold up my imaginary marble and I say, this is our lives, here on this planet. And I say, within this is all of heaven and all of hell, if I'm just, using metaphorically speaking. We still have the contrast within our lives to be able to learn from the good and the bad things that either happen to us, that we take part in, that we, by intentionally or otherwise, or inadvertently, we all can learn the lesson. But where we fail as a team, as individuals, as organizations, and this is why you've seen me put on some videos in the past that in the United States, you can't have a 71% effectivity and then leave $7 trillion in waste, which is the majority of that is, we're talking probably 80+% of that is human factors. You can't leave $5 to $6 trillion in our inability to do self-assessment, cooperate, work together, all these things, laying on the table because it's costing our economy, and that affects the thriving of lives, right? And that is equated to us shanking the ball into the woods, not learning from it, and then taking what is known as a mulligan in golf, is where you, for recreational golf, you can take basically a do-over on your first tee shot. But if people are taking multi-mulligans throughout an entire round of golf, that's not golf anymore. It's the same gimmicks. It's the high level of contractors that are used by organization. And don't get me wrong, tax breaks are what we've been conditioned to use and rely upon. But let's face it, folks, those are gimmicks, and they skew our effectivity. So if with all the gimmicks we're at 71% effective, you can be sure that number is probably 58 to 60%, right? So we have so much room to improve as individuals, as leaders, as team members, up and coming employees who have never worked in the workforce before, college graduates who maybe never had real work before going into the working world, and then those that have. And it doesn't matter from what walk of life or what experience level. If we can't do some self-assessment and go, hey, this is, this is what I'm doing. Oh, I screwed up here. If you can't own it when you make a mistake, how far have we fallen, right? I mean, I guess you could say it's been a continuous falling, because it would seem that we just invent more gimmicks to skew the effective, or effectiveness. So I would say this today when I was using the example of golf. I think that if you're going to break the generational chain of conditioning or codependence on gimmickry, on the false notion that we have it all figured out and that at some point in time we actually had it all figured out. Look, folks, we have never had it all figured out. And when I say never, that's with a capital N and a whole bunch of whipped cream on top of that. Never, okay? Never have we had it figured out. And if we aren't motivated by that never, then we're never going to get better, right? You're never going to get better if you can't own that you haven't, that you had the opportunity and then you failed to. If you say, well, the last 3 shots I shanked into the woods, right? Or the last 3 product lines we did like this, or the last 3, customer service, blah, blah, whatever, packages we put together, whatever it is for you and your team. Those didn't go well. We'll just keep doing, if you just keep hitting your head up against the wall, all you're going to get is dizzy. You're not going to improve. You're not going to improve your performance. And more than likely, this is probably a huge driver. I mean, I know it is a huge driver to poor organizational culture. And then that ripples outward into our civic and our political organizations, our religious institutions, and the culture at large. And we have to be careful we don't fall into the fantasy, okay, of believing that our crap doesn't stink, okay? It does. It does. Does that mean that we don't do pretty good things? Absolutely, it doesn't mean that. We do some really great things in all of cultures, all around the globe. But we also fail. We've failed as big as we've succeeded. And we have to close the gap on our ability to succeed by reducing how often we fail. And we don't get there without improving how well we execute the work, execute the technical skills, right? Whether it be in us as individuals, at work, within organizations, on the teams that we're in school when we're learning, raising families, right? Being parts of friend groups and civic organizations, for work and professional, and so on. We have to narrow the gap. And we won't narrow the gap if we live in a fantasy world that has us believing that we are as good as we're ever going to be. Now, I know that I have a potential to improve greatly at golf, right? For example, as I'm using the golf metaphor. I do. Do I think I'm going to be 100% better tomorrow? No. This is a everyday, right? Just like life, it's an everyday layering of getting better, right? Practicing, analyzing, executing, trying different things, working together. And this is part of the reason why I put my program together to help organizations improve. I did it in such a way that you wouldn't have to rely so often on so much gimmickry, but to allow you to break away from being codependent, all this conditioning, thinking that you need all these things. You don't need a lot of things, but you do need some sound, a sound approach that brings your team together, that allows them to be self-aware, present in the moment, prepared, right? Good planning, good communication, good meetings when the meetings need to happen, not all the time, but when they need to happen, to be able to improve upon what we did and clean up the mistakes we made. So that's the culmination. I guess I just wanted to kind of touch upon that today. It kind of struck me as like, talking about it from a sports angle would be a good thing. Keep in mind, not all of you have golfed. But one thing about all of this, it doesn't matter. I'm using golf and the technical skills and so forth that, basically necessary to, play that sport. But it could be just as easily any other thing. It could be how you unload your dishwasher. It could be how you do laundry. It could be, and that's the simplest stuff, right? In your homes and so forth. How, a young person, teaching them how to drive a car, right? Same thing. They got to learn those technical skills. And they have to be able to be competent enough to do that on their own without somebody over them all the time. So part of removing that codependence is making people competent, within themselves, competent and accountable and confident that they can do what they need to do. All right, folks, just touching a little bit today on the metaphor of golf and other activities that lend themselves to a little self-analysis to improve. Remember, hit that good domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage folks. And when you do that, not only are you improving culture and those that you impact, but you're also improving your own life. And that's an amazing thing. All right, folks, hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.